Hi,
Hi.
how are you?
I'm good, thanks. How are you?
Good. Did it work out okay getting on?
Yeah, it was pretty easy, pretty straightforward.
Good,
Thanks.
good. So I'm so happy that you joined me today.
Oh yeah, I'm thanks for asking me to join you.
Yeah, no, of course. Like I said, I love what you're doing on your account. I think awareness, especially in young athletes, is such an important part of this. Low energy availability and REDS is like a big thing that I talk about on my account because it's obviously really, or I won't say really common, but it's common in athletes, right? It's common to fly under the radar, but it's also common in active women as well,
Yeah,
even if we're not kind of exercising at a more competitive level, if that makes sense. So I think it's so important to kind of get the information out there.
yeah.
So I'd really love to kind of take this time and learn more about you, learn more about your experience. So why don't you tell everyone kind of who you are, the account that you started, and why you started it?
Yeah, so well to begin with, I'm Kerry-Ann. I'm currently in Loughborough Uni. I swim here and I also study towards a degree in biological science. And so I've been swimming competitively since I was about 10 years old. Um, but my story, I just started developing like disordered eating when I was about 14, so quite a young, vulnerable age, I guess. And it kind of just got worse, and to the point where I lost my period. Um, that was when I was completely, not eating enough. Had a really bad relationship with my body, with exercise, with food. Um, so that kind of inspired me to start this account is when I recovered. Because when I was going through it, I thought I was the only one. I thought I was the only one who lost my period because of sport. I thought it was so embarrassing, didn't want to talk to anyone about it. And then I kind of realized that so many people go through it. And I thought, well, if nobody's being open about it, then how are we meant to know that it's not normal? Because it is normalized, but despite that, nobody talks about it. And people have got this misconception that athletes are really, mentally strong and disciplined and healthy. Um, but they often don't realize that that can lead to a bad relationship with your mental health and your body. So I guess I kind of just wanted to be open about what I'd been through, um, and hopefully that would then inspire people to be open about what they were going through, and what they were struggling with, rather than thinking like I did that they were the only one going through it. Um, so yeah, that's kind of why I started this account, just to be more open and for people to realize that it's okay to, be vulnerable and share your story, and
Mhm.
not to hide and not let it define you. So yeah.
I love that. I really love that. And I think I agree. It's kind of common to talk about it, but it's not common for people to kind of express that they've been through it or
Yeah,
what they're struggling with or that it's something that they've seen in themselves. So I think it's so important to just for us to be more vocal about it.
yeah,
Um, and two, so like, because like you mentioned, you kind of went through like the disordered eating component. How did you kind of learn about like REDS or low energy availability and realize that that was a component for you, if
yeah.
that makes sense?
Yeah, well, yeah, because I think RADS is, something that not a lot of people have heard of. So I had to kind of learn about it myself because I'd been to the GP so many times, and I was always kind of told, yeah, you're underweight, but once you stop sport, you'll regain weight. They never looked at what state I was in mentally, what my relationship with food was like, why I was underweight. It was
Mm-hmm.
kind of just thought, it's normal. And we never looked into why I'd lost my period. So I started doing some research myself just because when I was about 17, I started getting a bit worried about it. You know,
Mm-hmm.
I was thinking, 16 is the age where you should definitely be getting your period. And I was like, well, what do I do? So I first came across the term amenorrhea, and that kind of was leading me on to female athlete triad, which then led me on to Red S.
Mm-hmm.
So it was kind of through my own my own research and looking into things. So I rang the GP back actually, and I said, like, I've come across this. What do you think? So I was then referred to a gynecologist, and we did some more blood tests because I'd already had so many, and nothing was being flagged up.
Mhm.
But I was eventually diagnosed with RED-S. But it's quite ironic because by that point I'd got help to work on my relationship with food and stuff already. So I've always kind of had to do it myself in a way.
Hmm. Yeah, and especially when you're dealing with like the disordered eating component on top of dealing with like some of the more physical clinical symptoms, like it can be really hard to navigate.
Definitely.
And that was going to be a question for me. Like, do you feel like oftentimes I'll talk with my clients about kind of like, the mental recovery of it, kind of getting over that like disordered relationship with food and that disordered mindset around like food and fueling your body or even training your body. But then there's also like the physical recovery of it, right? Where they don't always go like hand in hand at the same pace. Did you find that kind of one was like kind of ahead of the other, if that makes sense?
Yeah. Uh, I think the mental side always takes the longest,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
especially, I'd had these thoughts about food and stuff in my head for about 4 years. So that is bound to take a long time to reverse those thoughts and to move on. So,
Mm-hmm.
you know, gaining weight and stuff when you're still not quite there mentally is so,
Mm-hmm.
because you think it makes you want to not go back to how you were, but it's so hard. You've got to be mentally strong, and if they're not, like you said, if they're not going hand in hand, and the physical side of things is coming on before the mental side of things, it's definitely a challenge because sometimes you've still got these thoughts in your head that's telling you to do something that something opposite to what your body's doing. So like,
Mm-hmm.
your body might be accepting it and gaining weight, but your head is thinking, oh, this is daunting, this is scary, let's go back to restricting. But you've got to, push through that phase, and eventually the mental side of it will catch up eventually.
Exactly.
And, sometimes there's still some days when it's hard.
Mhm.
But on those days, you kind of have to, you have to accept as well that you do get bad days, and not every day you're going to be happy and, your relationship with food is fine. Because 4 years is a long time. So, it might take another 4 years, but you've just got to be patient with it, I think.
Mhm. Exactly. And just kind of keep going through the motions and kind of keep like reframing your thoughts and knowing that you're doing the right thing for your body. And I'm going to throw an extra question at you because it came up in conversation, but I think one of the hardest things too is, especially as an athlete, especially in a sport where kind of a lean body is more favored, right? In like the swimming culture, unfortunately. I can imagine that was kind of an additional layer of a challenge for you with like wanting to be the best swimmer, but also wanting to do what's best for your body and not knowing if they were going to necessarily line
Yeah.
up.
And I think, well, when I was recovering as well, it happened to be when COVID, when the pandemic happened.
Mm-hmm.
So my training was reduced. I wasn't in the pool at all, because we weren't able to. So I wasn't able to see either whether all these changes were making a difference to my performance. So I kind of think that helped a bit.
Yeah, it makes sense.
I wasn't able to say, oh, my training's going downhill because of this. It was having to work through it all during COVID, and then
Mm-hmm.
seeing how things were when I returned to the pool.
Mm-hmm.
But it is like I think it's a big challenge, and a reason why a lot of people don't want to open up about it, because they think, oh, if I say something, I'm going to have to gain weight, which is going to make me train slower, race slower. So it's a big challenge for athletes. But I think by that point, when I did get back into the pool, I noticed all these positive changes rather than negative. So I had more energy to train. I was able to recover better.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I was fueling properly for the session. So then that actually helped me. So I then saw, well, actually, fueling properly, eating more, getting my period is actually you know, helping me race better and get PBs and stuff. So that then knocked back the thought that it wasn't helping, which was
Mhm.
very helpful, really.
Yeah, sometimes we kind of just have to like trust that initial part of the process, right?
Yeah,
Until we start seeing those benefits.
definitely.
Because I always like remind all like the clients I work with that are struggling with red S or low energy availability, like there's no way your body can be training at its peak potential if it can't even generate a regular period
Yeah,
or like properly digest things, right? Like, but it is, I also get it. It's so hard to like understand that and see the other side until you're actually seeing the other side, right? And seeing those benefits.
yeah, definitely. Yeah. You know, and just because, you know, it's like when you first start experiencing red S, you might see a big, you know, a good um effect on your performance. You know, you've lost
Mm-hmm.
weight, so you might be faster because you're a bit lighter. But then when you continue to restrict and to eat less and less and less, your performance then goes down. So it's the same with weight gain. You have to accept that maybe initially your performance might the opposite way. It might go down because you've got to get used to all these changes. But eventually, once your body's used to it and is leveling out, it will go back up again. So it's just temporary, and it's not, you know, it's not forever. So you've just got to
Mm-hmm.
go through that initial phase of it, I think.
Exactly. Yeah, that honeymoon phase, I think when you initially start restricting or losing weight can be really, really deceiving.
Yeah,
And I think can be something that a lot of athletes hold on to for a little longer than they should before, because it does take a while to kind of see the negative impacts.
yeah.
So you mentioned, like you said, you lost your period. Were there any other symptoms that you were noticing that kind of aligned with red S or low energy availability?
Yeah, I think looking back now, I can definitely, at the time, I didn't want to see it.
Mm-hmm.
But, you know, I was constantly cold hands. I was always cold. I was always hungry as well, really. Um, Tired, like fatigue, not recovering properly. Or I was always stiff, and I just thought that was a good sign because it meant I was training well. When actually it should have been a sign that I wasn't recovering properly because I wasn't
Mm-hmm.
giving the body the food to that it needed to recover. So there was that, and then I guess again like the mental side of it. So body dysmorphia, but like a really bad body image. Because I was super lean, but I still didn't think that was good enough. Um, so yeah, and not eating when I was hungry, like waiting till the next meal time, just following these silly rules so that somebody puts in place that you just don't don't need to follow.
Mm-hmm. And I think you bring up a good point with the symptoms, right? Like there's those symptoms that were like, oh, okay, like clearly something's off. Like they're the symptoms that we're going to the doctor for. But then there's those other symptoms where they kind of become our new normal and we don't even notice that it's abnormal until we either learn about red S or until we start correcting things and we're like, oh wait, actually I feel 10 times better than I used to.
Yeah,
I didn't even realize I felt crappy.
yeah, definitely.
So, and I think I meant to mention this before, but with you mentioned when you went to the GP, like I think that's one of the hardest components of this because this research is still kind of new. It's like
Yeah,
5, 10 years where, and again, it's a little older than that, but where it's really kind of becoming a little bit more mainstream. And some of the GPs, especially if they don't work with athletes a lot of the time, like a lot, then they might not be aware of it. And that can be one of the hardest gaps to kind of
yeah.
understand that. It doesn't mean it's not going on, even if your GP is not identifying.
Yeah, just because it's so discouraging as well. You know, it was like, well, I've tried going to the GP. They think I'm okay, so I must be fine. Because, you know, you put your trust in them. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and I do think it is just because at the moment, that, like you said, there's not enough awareness. So, you know, that's something that needs to be done. Just because when you finally pluck up the courage to go and talk to somebody about it, you want it to be dealt with there and then rather than them dismissing you and then you just carry on as if there is nothing wrong. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
but I think it is going to be a long process until people are aware of this condition and that you do, because at the minute you need like specialists who understand it, don't you? Um, So it's a tough one, really. Yeah.
Hmm. Exactly. It's going to take some time. I think a lot of like more sports medicine doctors and people who are more working in the sports field, I think are, becoming much, much more aware of this because they work with so many athletes. But I agree. I think getting it to kind of like the general public, the general practitioners, the general gynecologists that are just kind of seeing the general population, it's going to take a little bit of time, but we'll get there. They have so much to know anyway. So I think it's just one more thing for them to be aware of.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh,
So
yeah.
a couple last questions. So what were the like 2 or 3 biggest things that you felt like were helpful for you? Like once you identified like RED-S was going on for you and low energy availability, like what were 2 of the 3 biggest things that you felt like helped you correct what was going on?
A big part of it for me, I
Oh, I
think.
can't hear you.
Oh,
Let's see. I don't know what happened.
can you hear me now?
Can if anyone who's watching, can you guys hear her? Speak again. I don't know what happened. We did lose a connection.
Yeah, I can hear you,
I don't
but
know what happened. Oh, here, let me like refresh real quick. Hold on. Nope, that's not refresh. That's just turn it away. Speak again.
can you hear me?
Oh, you know what? I think it's so weird. Here, let me take it off here.
No.
Speak again. She
Can
can
you
hear.
hear?
Okay, so they can hear you. I can't. I'll try and correct it on my end. So I want you to keep. I can like vaguely hear you, but I don't know what switched on my end. So, but thank you for letting me know that you guys can hear her. Okay, so continue on.
Yeah. So yeah, for me, a big part of working on like the mental side of it. Because without that, I don't think you have a good enough foundation to then work on the physical side of it. So, for me, I would regularly meet up with the person who was helping me through it to kind of talk about how I was finding things and how I was coping with the weight gain and just being open and saying sometimes I'm not coping at all. And having that support. So I think support is really important. So I had the support of the guy who was helping me. I had to have my family on board because I think you can't do it on your own because you need to be open about what you're struggling with so that they can help you, and then if something's triggering that you're able to talk about that as well. And then I kind of did it slowly, so I had to increase my food intake, but I did it slowly so that the weight gain wasn't all at once and massive, and that it set me back even further. So it was about taking things slowly, knowing that it wasn't going to happen overnight. I wasn't gonna get my period back tomorrow, kind of thing, which is something I kind of found hard because it was like, oh, I'm trying to do everything. Why is it taking so long? And then again, having those conversations and saying, well, you've been in this bad place for 4 years. Of course, it's going to take a while. So like the mental side of things, doing it slowly, having that support around me, being able to be open about it, telling people when I was struggling, and yeah, just kind of finding time for yourself as well, because when you're trying to recover, it can sometimes seem overwhelming. So I guess having something that you can turn to, so like journaling or reading. I love reading, so having time for yourself as well can, because I feel as well in recovery you can get so stuck into it and caught into trying to get better that that's all you think about, and then you start stressing like, where's my period? So you need also to know that you need to take a step back, so that's not the only thing on your mind. So yeah, having something outside of your sport, outside of recovery, just finding yourself again, and finding that once you find yourself and get your life back, then everything else kind of falls into place, and that you shouldn't force it. It will just kind of, it will happen eventually. yeah, I don't know if that's
No,
helpful.
I think that's great. Yeah, just that support. I think kind of like you were saying, just continuing to put one foot in front of the other, knowing that you're doing the right thing for yourself, for your body, knowing that everything's going to kind of eventually come together. And unfortunately, everyone's kind of like a very individualized timeline, right? So it really, I've seen some women get their period back after a month, right? Depending on how long they've been going through low energy availability. And then I've seen somewhere it takes 6 months to a year, even when everything is being done correctly,
Yeah,
and I think
I took about 5 months to get my period back. So, you know, in the bigger picture, it's nothing really. Because if you think, well, if you've got everything in place by the end of that 5 months, then think of how many years that you'll then be healthy, rather than thinking, oh, 5 years, 5 months is so long to be working on something. It really isn't in the bigger picture of things, and be making getting yourself healthy will then set you up for being healthy for long term. Then, rather than making it a short term fix.
mm-hmm.
Yeah,
No, definitely. No, definitely. And I think you brought up another good point of, like kind of going at a pace that you're comfortable with,
yeah,
right? Like,
yeah,
I think, we want to get our body better. We want to give our body what it needs, but it's also so important to kind of, this can be a little anxiety ridden and stressful and kind of like, oh, what's going to happen, right? And I think as
definitely.
long as we're moving forward, like whatever pace that is, as long as you're kind of clinically stable and can function in your day to day, like it's okay to kind of base your pace off of like what's also going to help you like mentally stick with it,
Yeah,
right? Like,
yeah, because if trying to go through it too fast and doing everything at once, it can you don't want to be in a worse place than you're already in. You don't want to be set back even further and it take you even longer. So just
mm-hmm,
just trust the process, and if that means taking it slowly, then that's fine. Everybody's got their own things that they're comfortable with, like you said, and it's just about learning what works best for you. And
mm-hmm,
that's true for everything. It's about learning what's best for you in terms of your food. Some people might need more, some people might need less. Working out what works better for you in terms of how much exercise you're doing. Some people might be able to train for 16 hours and be healthy, but for others that might be a sign of overtraining. So it's always
mm-hmm.
about trusting that your body knows what's best for your own body. Yeah, I think that's a big part of it as well.
No, that's so true. And so, like, I guess the last question is really just like, what if you could give like one piece of advice to like young women, active women, maybe if they're struggling with food rules or, they're not necessarily confident in how they're feeling their body or they're starting to see some kind of random symptoms pop up, what would be your biggest piece of advice to them?
Um, I would just say that don't don't think that you're the only one who's going through it, because you're not. You're really not. And you might be told that it's normal, but it's also not normal. It's common. It's very common, but that doesn't make it normal. Um, and don't be afraid to tell people that you're struggling, and don't be embarrassed. Like, you know, this is something that happens to a lot of us, and too many of us are embarrassed, which is why it continues to happen, and we've got this big secrecy around around this topic. So I would just say, and as well, that your body weight doesn't determine how you perform. So a lot of us think that our lowest body weight will allow us to perform, when for most of us it's the opposite. So just yeah, I would just say that it's so important to be open, to know that it's not normal, and to make sure that put your health first rather than putting your sport first. Because I know that I know as athletes that we're all determined to get somewhere, and we've all got our own goals. But if you lose yourself in the process, then that goal isn't right for you. Have a goal that ensures that you're healthy at the same time, rather than something that's putting your health completely at risk. Is what I
No,
would
that's
say.
great. That's so helpful. That's so helpful. So tell if anyone wants to kind of follow you and kind of learn more about your journey and your story, what is your Instagram handle and where can they find you?
Yeah, so you can find me at female_athlete_triad_red S. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much for coming on here. I think this was so helpful for a lot of people to kind of hear, just someone who's gone through it, who's kind of seen the other side, seen the benefits of the other side. And again, I just think it's so awesome what you're doing. So keep kind of getting the message out there.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's been really great to chat to you. I really enjoyed it.
Yes, you too. Me too. Have a great rest of your day.
Oh, you too. Thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye.